recorded. I think we recorded his apologies, Neil. There's no way of differentiating.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Google Meeting. If you didn't decline, didn't turn up, that wouldn't be apologies.
Yeah, so I think he's apologised for not coming at all, as opposed to declined.
Great. So we're correct. We're all present. Item number 1 on the agenda was going to be a statement from the Intersect board. Adam Rush, I understand, was going to join. Duncan, do you have any information about that?
I don't have any information other than that he accepted the invite.
Okay. So what I propose then is we put that issue, we hold that issue for now. If Adam turns up, then we can speak to it. It would be useful to have some input from the board. If not, we can just discuss it. We can just discuss it. Hi, Jack.
Jack. Hello, Jack.
So we're just postponing the discussion of the Intersect board pending whether Adam Rush joins us or not, Jack. And this meeting is being recorded for your information. So,
okay, thanks, Kevin.
So let's just postpone that for now. So item number 2, update from the IOE delivery assurance meeting yesterday. I was going to suggest that Johnny did that since he attended the meeting.
I might be too granular in my reporting. Let me know for next time, but I'll go swiftly.
No, go for it.
Okay. And I asked explicitly to be invited to the delivery assurance meeting because I haven't had that exposure before and I wanted to get more technical rather than political. So here's the report. In the past 2 weeks, there's been the release of 10.3.1. There's been some major refactoring in the ledger there, performance improvements, consensus minor changes, technical debt. There's been more denial of service mitigation improvements, building from the fix that was done at the end of last year, started this year with 10.1.4. I'll not go into detail, but that has been done. Some lightweight checkpointing has been done, which is a pre-requirement or a prerequisite for the Genesis rollout. Yeah, and we've got a draft release. This is bigger news. Draft release of 10.4.0, which is the first implementation in the node of the UTXO hard drive LMDB implementation, and it has passed performance and test benchmarks. And there is testing in progress. Now, there's some caveats there, which Neil would like to point out.
Basically, this is the memory backend. Okay, so this is changing the interface so that the disk backend can be added to it, right?
Lightning Memory Map Database is what it stands for. So it will reduce the amount of memory load and move things to the SSD, things like the UTXO set, state address and delegation, state distribution, that kind of thing. But it's not ready for SPO implementation yet under the testing. It's more recommended for any ancillary things like Cardano DB sync nodes, stuff like that. There are published documents as well about these things. So there's, I'll just put it in chat as well. So we got migrating to the UTXO HD node as a user, and then the other thing was this upcoming Genesis integration. There is a Cardano Genesis published document. So yeah, that's what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And then there's planned draft rollout and diagram that hasn't been published yet, as far as I'm aware, for UTXO HD implementation, but that will be coming up. And CAS agent is another thing that's being worked on, and there's a draft for the blog post relating to it and sort of communicating the SPOs, how it'll work. Yeah, and that's the last 2 weeks. Do you want to go into what's coming up in the next 6, or is it just a reporting of the history?
I think the only other thing to note is this is the end of the first 6-week period. So,
oh yeah, milestone review is
IOE have got to prepare a milestone review for us to formally accept.
So that was the last 2 weeks, and then the upcoming 6 weeks for the next milestone. There's going to be, well, this has already been discussed multiple times, the governance actions to come for increasing Plutus memory limits and enabling byte string conversion in Plutus v2, currently only possible in 3. Neil?
That's actually us reporting to them, not them reporting to us. In the sense that it's the TSC who's going to do that.
Yes, indeed. But it's in the next 6 weeks. But yes, I see what you're saying. Data list to release an updated ledger list is on this, and preparation for 10.4 in the next 6 weeks is upcoming to sort of communicate the UTXOHD thing, LMDB, unified in-memory interface, and just rollout plan finalization, because I've said already it's in draft. And then further preparation for 10.5, which will have even more things. Tentatively, the cast agent itself would be integrated into the node, but that's to be determined. And then there's more network and CPU performance enhancements that would help make Genesis more efficient. Neil, go ahead.
So I think the only other thing of note was we did discuss documentation and trying to refine the scope of the documentation stuff, and it was noted that we had due to conversations between Kevin and others, that the main issue was the lack of transaction layer data information, not actually core, the layer 1 stuff, but the transaction layer stuff. And it was also noted that due to IO's closing down of the PAB team about 2 years ago, it's not clear that the skill set exists to necessarily write that inside IO, so we may have to go somewhere else to find it.
And that's what I had. I don't know if it's sufficient. If anybody wants to fill any gaps,
I think that's a good summary. Thank you, Johnny, and thank you for attending the meeting. So
it was the best experience I've had so far.
Excellent, good. So we're being asked to sign off on that. We can do this out of bound, or we can just take a show of hands. What do you propose? No?
We're not being asked to show on just the update at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a milestone deliverable. This is some kind of milestone.
No, we haven't had that delivered to us yet.
We've not had that delivered to us. Okay, then we don't need to.
This is just a purely verbal update. There's Abby pointed out that there was a piece of documentation needed to pass the boundary. So that's what we have to approve. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
requirement for verifying work.
Yeah. So let's stand by to receive that. Great. And I think there was also a rollout plan that was going to be passed on. I think I did that in the TSC channel. So please, everyone, do have a look at the UTXOHD rollout plan. Brief inspection on my part suggested that it's pretty comprehensive.
And Duncan, I just want to note this is a payment trigger point. So.
Gotcha.
Great. Thank you. So if everyone is comfortable with that update, we can proceed with the agenda. We have Adam Rush with us now. So welcome, Adam. You're representing the Intersect board as we understand it. So thank you for coming and talking to us. It's always great to have you with us. And thank you, Jack, representing the Intersect executive, who is also joining us. So Adam, as you're aware, presumably the primary goal of the TSC is, of course, to ensure the continuity of Cardano. So the TSC has always been acting with that principle in mind, and this group has expressed its concern with the process that we're now in. I think we can all accept, and I think Jack, you were saying this, that it's chaotic. I'm being told by various people that it's confrontational, and it's failing to correctly identify gaps or needs in the Cardano system. So I think we can see there are definitely some improvements to be made, and what we hope is we can reach some accommodation and avoid direct confrontation with the board in order to get a smoother, less confrontational, more coherent process worked out.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the issues was that we have not had great communication channels within the organization. On the part of the board, I recognize that there was some failures in leadership over this process. You yourselves noted that you brought several concerns to us throughout the past year, and that they were not being addressed. The board has been trying to rectify this. We have new leadership in place now, but with this budget process proceeding, we have been getting a lot of questions from the DREPs, from others, asking how your proposal fits with other proposals, particularly the IRG proposal, where there is significant overlap. And that was somewhere where we felt like we didn't have a full overview of exactly what you were planning to submit, and hadn't had a chance to talk over that with you. And so it's the full scope of it was something that we did not feel like we could support as an organization. So that's why we said that this proposal could not be taken forward as something that Intersect as an organization supports. So that was why we made the statement we did. And we hope if you wanted to, have some talk of what we could arrange, we're open to figuring out like how to improve these communication channels, how to figure out what the remit is, where those boundaries are. But that's something that I think will be a bit of a longer process. Yeah.
Neil, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to ask some questions, just some clear questions here. So can you tell us when was that process for creating that board resolution initiated?
Pretty much as soon as you put in your proposal, because we started meeting with you.
So we're talking several weeks ago it started then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Secondly, did you reach out to either the TSC or its secretariat at any time during that period?
My understanding is that there were other members of the board that did reach out. I guess my question for you is, did you reach out to us with the proposal?
Okay. Well, we've had this. I mean, we basically. I'm just trying to find the process by which you reach that decision. First of all, right? So basically, can you confirm, therefore, that the decision was made without? Where did you get the evidence? You had discussions. People produced information to you. Did you ever check the veracity of that information?
What information are you talking about? The information
Adam, you have talked about us not talking to the TSC, right? You have talked about us, various other things about us. You have made a set of decisions and made statements in both the secretary of the was that true, Kevin? The secretary of which board was kept involved?
Yes. Lawrence, acting as secretary to the Intersect board,
was told this stuff.
He was, as Jonathan, I believe, he was informed.
Because you see,
actually,
I was in conversation with Lawrence throughout this, and my understanding, was that he was informing the board.
Yeah, that is actually one of the unfortunate aspects of this situation, is that as was discussed in a previous meeting between the board and previous stakeholders, we were not receiving all of the information that the secretary of the board was receiving.
So the key thing I'm trying to get here actually is a matter of process, not an actual decision, right?
Sure.
It seems to me that the board didn't act in the normal standards of natural justice here, in that they, information was provided. It wasn't verified. It wasn't verified, that information. People have repeated things about us, right? Like we didn't reach out to the board, to the Intersect, which we did, right? So I feel, and what I'm saying is, you engaged in a sort of process by which the board set the agenda, set the punishment, and executed that punishment without any form of conflict of interest.
Hold on.
No, I mean, I'm saying from a natural justice point of view, right? This body of people was never approached, and we never had a chance to talk to the board about that process. and that decision was made. Okay. Right now, we had set up a number of meetings this year, as Kevin has said, with all 3 of which were cancelled in a row. Okay, number 2. So what I'm trying to say is, the thing I have that makes me well, as a Welshman, makes my blood boil at this point, right? Is that I believe you didn't act in accordance with any form of natural justice in this process, and I think that's what I'm complaining about at this point.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing. But I'm not disagreeing that you have rights to change your minds and all the rest of it. But the way it is, the way that is absolutely fine, right? But the point is, you didn't engage in a process of natural justice here, which meant we had never had an opportunity to explain to you. Right? This is the point. You know, this is the issue of being, you know, you inside a closed session. You took evidence. It wasn't verified. You made a decision. You announced that decision, and the people who made that decision about have no input to that.
What is the decision that you think we made?
Well, no, look. Well, the point is, the decision you made a decision. You have also, Adam, you personally have also made statements on X saying that we did not inform the Intersect, and you sort of acted outside with doing this, right? Which wasn't in the statement. Okay, and I'm going to because we do actually have evidence that we talked to Lawrence. Okay, so the key point here is that the statement has sort of said we acted outside our power, but at the time, now we can talk about the process here. At the time, we checked at least twice with Intersect that we were happy with us to do it, and we were allowed to engage in this process, and we were encouraged to continue.
Okay.
Duncan, could you provide?
If I made any statements personally that may have seemed too harsh, I will apologize. There were also some statements made about me and made about others that I feel like may have been a bit harsh, maybe made in the heat of the moment. There were some arguments that were going on in the budget workshops that I was concerned about between the individuals who put forward the proposal and other vendors that work with Intersect, saying that there was basically bad blood between them. Rather than getting into that right now,
I'm only referring to what the board did and the actions of board members.
Let me ask you this. When you guys put forward the statement, you said that this was a unanimous decision of the technical steering committee. Was this a unanimous decision of the technical steering committee?
Duncan, would you like to answer that? It was. At the point of submission, it was.
Because I was under the impression that one of your members has resigned over the individuals who put this forward, and another one of your members repudiated it publicly.
Well, at the point of submission, that was true. When he stepped back, we removed the word unanimous from that process. Okay, in the second draft.
Right.
Okay. So at the point is, from a contemporaneous point of view, we did not lie.
No, I'm not accusing you of lying. What I'm saying is that this has been a process that was flawed, that this is a complex situation in which there was a lot of breakdowns of communication. Okay. I'm not trying to I'm not accusing you of acting.
No, I'm not taking, I'm just saying the thing I'm trying to get over here, and the thing that actually is the fact that, you know, we believed we were following all the right processes. I must admit, this whole bloody natural justice problem here, right? I mean, I think the process you went through was one in which all you had to do was reach out to somebody like the TSC Secretariat or any member of the TSC, and we wouldn't be in this position.
If we had reached out to you, would you have withdrawn your
we would have just, you know, we didn't know, we didn't have any clue until you brought that statement out on Monday evening that there was any conflict like this.
As far as you were fully apprised by the Secretary of the actions that were taking place.
Okay.
Can I ask you some questions on what the process should have been? Because I've, you know, as Secretary, I've got a few questions on, you know, where this has gone wrong, because I don't understand a few things. That So one of the things that you've raised in this call and previously is that the TSC did not raise their budget with the board. Other committees show the board their budget before submitting it.
I didn't say the budget. I said there was obligations within your proposal as your group stated that. My understanding of your proposal, and if I may ask, your proposal said that you wanted delegated authority from the DREPs to be able to choose vendors for continuity and to do gap analysis and fill the gaps of work that need to be done. Is that correct?
I can add a bit of color to that, to work with working groups under the committee, with DREPs, with anyone who wanted to come in and discuss and provide analysis to vendor applications under specified and specific organized line items of work, rather than ad hoc submitted proposals of work that would lead to potential natural gaps. So it was an attempt to create a structured process, but fully in collaboration with the Cardano community, not just we decide.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. And if there was another part of my understanding of what your proposal was, is that if there was a failure to deliver on part of a vendor that had been previously approved, you would then have the power to remove that vendor and choose someone else to fulfill the contract. Is that incorrect, or is that a correct understanding of your proposal?
So Adam, we were having this discussion during one of the sessions, and Ricky basically confirmed that the contract that is being set up has that capability, that it is possible to replace one vendor with another in the event, for example, of failure. And indeed, it's going to be necessary. I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen. Hopefully the vendors will carry out the work as required. Hopefully we don't see a situation where a vendor fails. But there are situations where if a vendor was to fail, if it was some critical piece of infrastructure, it will be necessary to replace them, indeed.
Essentially, the proposal's content was sort of bringing up risk management and things that might be needed as contingencies, but it's not saying like it's going to be unilaterally deciding no. It's if there are failures, there needs to be plans. And that's what it's worded like.
And how many vendors again was it that you expected to be working with?
Well,
that's an indeterminate number, Adam. So it's going to be. So what we'd identified was that there are about 120, I think it was 112 FTEs that are available for work within the ecosystem. The number of vendors then we wouldn't be sure about, but I would anticipate something like 10 or 20 realistically to cover the core work. Now, someone from the community has approached me and said, actually, look, there are all these other small things that need to be done in layer 1. So actually, there may be more than we were anticipating when we put that in. But there's definitely a gap, and there's definitely a need there, Adam, too. And these vendors are not being represented anywhere in the current process.
And it would be the remit of the committee to look at what the FTEs are available with these vendors, then assign the various FTEs into different projects.
Well, what we would expect is that vendors would indicate to us what FTEs they would be providing for specific pieces of work within some general remit. And one of the things you obviously have to do, Adam, is to, for example, say, can the vendor actually supply that number of that resource? It's not unusual, and I think it's probably happening already with the current process, that some vendors are overcommitting their capability. You do have to resolve that.
Right, but it would be up to the committee leads to determine which FTEs available from the vendors would go into the teams working together, because they have.
Well, we would assume that the vendors that are currently doing the work would be the vendors that get it, right? In the sense that it would be daft, completely daft, for somebody from new to give something to do with Paras if they know nothing about it. So the idea there was it was a lot of these people, we talked with all the primary vendors of today, right? So we had conversation, and the secretary reached out to them to confirm that they would be willing to work in this sort of style, right? Or at least would be willing to work under the general terms of what we were producing, actually. And we got positives back from all of them. Okay, number one. But I think the thing here is we were not looking to necessarily, we were looking to act as an honest broker in establishing this process together and resolving conflicts, not to act as assignments, okay? In the future, right, in order to formulate some form of open tendering, there may have to be a slightly more, well, actually not a slightly more complex process, something like bid by lots. Are you familiar with some of these approaches that people use for public procurement?
No.
I'm so sorry. Can I just, before Jack leaves, I just want to make a single point here. And Jack, I think this is really important that because the way the budget system was set up, we've been told that we need to identify gaps that have not been catered to in core development and maintenance as part of our budget. That was the guidance that Adam gave on Monday night, and apparently others have followed. But how were we supposed to do that when the budget submission ended on the Friday and the first analysis was done on the Saturday? You know, we needed a gap there to actually say in time to identify the gaps in work. And there are gaps in the work, which perhaps the TSC can sort of pull forward, of things with maintenance that have been missed and need to be looked at. And how are we actually going to manage that, other than we're going to need some money to run an RFP process to be able to fill these gaps? So I think if we're not going to have some kind of system like that, we need some guidance on what do we do with this, because otherwise we're going to have huge problems where essential pieces of work are not done. Moving aside anything that's already been covered by TWEAG or IOG or ZK Fold that was in there, it still maintains that there is work that needs to be done that is not in the budget currently. And the risk is the ship is about to sail without that being accounted for. And that's the thing that I think we need to get to. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm just aware Jack was leaving, and I wanted to get.
No, I can. Maybe I can quickly comment back. Yeah, thanks, Duncan. Yeah, the time doesn't allow for this through. I completely accept that. It's not realistic in any shape or form to do gap analysis on proposals on a technical side of things. It could take weeks to do one gap analysis on one technology feature, right? I mean, it's just impossible to do it so quickly. We do have I guess my feedback here is that we have a month before the Treasury withdrawal at least. So there is another check and balance before any funding is released as part of anything that's approved in this budget interaction to do some gap analysis. I appreciate it's not going to be comprehensive in any shape or form, even with a month. I guess if a Treasury withdrawal passes and gaps emerge 3 months into implementation or work, and we understand that we need an RFP process to kick off to fill that gap, then we put a budget interaction out again for that gap analysis. There's nothing preventing us doing multiple budget actions over the next sort of 3 or 6 months. I guess the net change limit is going to be the only consideration.
Jack, sorry,
yeah,
Jack,
go on, Neil.
but I'm saying that might be too late, right? The point is, some of these things, these gaps, we're already hitting. We can see gaps where basically there needs to be some form of delegated authority, I can't say, to allow us to start filling those gaps,
okay.
right?
Yeah, I can quickly just one on that point, Neil, because I think where the power of the TSC has is to make a recommendation that a milestone can't be achieved because there's a gap in that particular implementation, and therefore Interset TSC would recommend a stop payment until that's rectified.
Jack, you are completely unaware of the size of the problem here, right? You are completely unaware of the size of the problem that we're already seeing and managing, and how we have to maintain the continuity and the maintenance here.
And
okay?
if I may,
I think this probably speaks to the huge gap between us, right, and our approaches, is because actually this is not played up by anybody. We've just been doing the job, right?
okay.
Should we let Ben
still up and away?
Ben, do you want to speak?
Ben, could you?
Yeah, I put the majority of what I wanted to say into the chat, just expanding on the lot idea that Neil had kind of kicked off. So I hope that's useful to you, Adam. This is a pretty standard practice. I've seen it a lot in government-led bidding projects. The other thing I wanted to mention is really the ethos that drove us to this was really looking at the beginnings of CDEC as it formed, and recognizing also, even before CDEC appeared, that one of our goals ought to be to expand and diversify the people as well as the number of companies engaged in delivering core services as a means of fully decentralizing the system, as a means of securing the continuity of Cardano, and a little bit around disentangling our relationship with subcontractors that are currently contracted through IO anyway. So I would say those are the primary motivations. Maybe someone else has more to say on that as to why we were looking at this approach. Certainly, CDEC's initial endeavors were pretty categorically going to land CDEC into a number of anti-compete legislation issues. So the best way to go about this that encouraged maximum competition appeared to be a bidding process with this sort of lot system set up.
Okay. Johnny, do you have something to say?
Yeah, just that this seems to have become a discovery meeting on the issues at hand that were difficult for the board to answer the questions of, right? And I would have appreciated that discovery meeting to have come before a board announcement of the lack of being able to support the proposal without context. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I actually wanted to just go over this all for the record because
I'm extremely happy you're here asking the questions, but I'm not happy you weren't here earlier asking the questions. That's what it is. And we had 3 cancelled meetings with Chair from the board.
Yeah. What I guess what I'll say is that what you have all described is a huge undertaking. And you guys are technical experts, and I recognize that, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the role that you play in the ecosystem, not only here as committee members of Intersect, but also in your day jobs as people who work on Cardano. But this is a huge undertaking. And this, when we discussed your proposal in the board, we were not having meetings just about your proposal. This is why it took so long for us to address it. It was as part of a larger discussion over what was happening within the organization, and the fact that we had failures of leadership, the fact that we had siloed communications, the fact that we had breakdowns of process, and the fact that we were facing a crisis of an existential crisis of our organization. It is not certain that we will receive funding from the community. That is, let's just put it out there. Let's just be real. I don't know whether or not the community will vote to fund Intersect. It could be that we have a runway that lasts until August, and then the board of directors will be forced to decide whether we go and ask people to fund us voluntarily, or we voluntarily shut down the organization because we don't have the funds to continue. That is something that we are going to have to decide as a board, as the fiduciaries of this organization. So we are not confident that we can necessarily take on all of the responsibilities that you're proposing in this proposal. And the fact that it's also, we have community members coming to us and asking us why we are competing with another organization, a vendor that has been doing this for a very long time. I don't necessarily have the answers for that, and we haven't had the chance.
I have one. I've been saying it publicly.
Well, I'm just going to look. Let me just finish up with this. We, like, the fact that we have been in some ways paralyzed as an organization has made it so we weren't able to have a good response to that. So even now, as we get our organization back on track, we didn't have the confidence that we would be able to support you in this endeavor. And so it's a matter of, we have to walk before we run. Do I want to see the system, the ecosystem diversified? Yes, absolutely. And more decentralized? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that Intersect needs to be the organization to take on all of that coordination through a committee, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly not sure it can be done at this time if it should be done by Intersect as opposed to another MBO that's maybe affiliated with Intersect. I'm just being real here about where we're at this moment with Intersect.
I don't know. I'd like to say you're going to have to do a lot of this anyway as we go to the next stage.
Oh, I absolutely know that.
Yeah. So
that's
we're
part of my other consideration.
So we're very conscious of that, and what we're also conscious of is that rather than having a structured way to do that, we now have a largely unstructured way. So this is going to make the next stage, unfortunately, the contract negotiation rather harder than it could have been.
I see. I'm not sure if it will be harder because at least we're going to have a vendor. If in what, like looking at the votes as they are right now, it certainly looks like IO Engineering's proposal has community approval to go forward. So if they were to be given if the community were to entrust them with the services that they've asked to take on, those are certain responsibilities that Intersect as an organization doesn't have to worry about, so that we can work with them to do other things and fill in the gaps, what the actual gaps are, as opposed to having to spin up completely new processes, having to do a lot of these things that would be over our capacity is my fear.
Yeah, I'm concerned about things like setting up detailed technical milestones, Adam. That can't be done quickly. It takes a lot of discussion. Also, there are things like technical feasibility, etc., that have to be considered, and these could be done as part of a proposal review process. So if you do this properly, what happens is you build up to a situation where the final proposal is something that it's definitely workable and can definitely be accepted. But indeed, there's quite a lot. You can't do that instantly. Is part of the point. Johnny.
I want to recognize Ricky next as well, because he put his hand up. But yeah, just the question again, it comes back to the discovery meeting could have happened when you were having that conflict of how to answer that question. We would have been able to meet with you and discuss how to answer that question, and we were perfectly open for that, and we weren't aware that that was a concern.
I'll say that the discovery was supposed to happen with Jer, and
yeah, I think
those meetings.
Each time it was cancelled, it was for a very legitimate reason. I have to point that out. So it's not like it was intended that way. But
all parties were working in good faith. It was just a breakdown process.
But anyone else could have reached out to us from the board, not just Jer, and we would have absolutely been able to come up with an answer, which again is a misconception of the DREPs because it's not competing for work. It's talking about how process happens, but Intersect was never going to do the engineering work. And in fact, the proposal itself names existing contractors that would be possibly preferred for items of work because of continuity requirements in the Constitution. So it was covered within the proposal itself. But of course, we have the issue externally of the claims that IOE may not participate in an RFP process. But we asked Ricky in meetings here, had he heard anything officially? And the answer officially was there has been no negative or dissenting statement being made that we wouldn't engage in such a process. So that was something we were using as guidance on official channels versus unofficial channels. So yeah, we weren't trying to compete with IO. And we would have been able to give you a very detailed answer on that.
Thanks, John. Ricky, I think you're next in the queue.
Yeah, as far as the amount of effort is concerned, assessing a bunch of RFPs, responses to RFPs versus agreeing on milestones for projects, for example, that IE would be putting forward, it must be substantially less work for you now than it would be if you were to have 2, 3, 4, 5 responses to each individual RFP. That's got to be a lot of work for the TSC. We've discussed this in previous TSC meetings, and everybody agreed how much work that would be. And I think now this process will give you not a small amount of work, but the minimum amount of work that's required, because you will still have to look at all the milestones, but at least you're working with a single supplier, and you just have to work out what those those milestones are, rather than evaluating however many for each individual project. That would have been an awful lot of work, and would have been, I can't imagine this being done even in the whole kind of year that we have available. It would have been a very, very, very large amount of work, because you would have had a lot of people contending probably for the same projects. We certainly would have bid for almost everything if we'd have done it in that RFP type process.
So to counter Ricky, I'm honestly not expecting 4 or 5 sensible proposals for each work item. There simply isn't the capability within the community to do that. And maybe you get some work items being competitive, but realistically, IO is the main game in town, and
well, surely you would have expected at least 2 responses to the RFPs. Otherwise, what's the point?
The point is to have an open process. What you've got actually,
This is an open process.
in some ways, what you've got is the kind of the first stage to an RFP, but with less structure, Ricky. So we're that's what we're seeing, and the less structure is in the form of, for example, the questions that are being posed to proposers, the triage capability, and the content of the proposal. So I don't honestly see that there's a huge difference from the RFP process and what we still have to do. We've just, maybe if we're lucky, we've gained some sentiment on the budget, as against sentiment about the items that will be funded. But in order to form a coherent work program, we're still going to have to go through essentially the same amount of work to do that. Neil.
Can I just jump in just with I've had a hand raised for a little bit. I'm curious just to get a bit of direction, Adam, then with the gaps that the TSC is seeing. I think there's also a very good argument that, my background is in program management, and I look at across the board and say there are a lot of very high risk projects that are interdependent here. We have no contingency as far as I can see. We're not accounting for, in the delivery of SIP 1694, there had to be a number of contracts spun up last minute for, unforeseen work. I'm not seeing how that gets dealt with, never mind the fact that we know we have a system where anyone can put anything forward, and we sit with our fingers crossed that all the work that needs to get done is bidded for, and someone puts a proposal in. We have gaps. How are we going to deal with those in what is now extremely urgent manner? Because otherwise we're running with high risks going into this process.
Yeah, the answer is I'm not sure. I will tell you that that's something that I hope that Jack and Nick can work with you on to identify the best way to do that, because I want Intersect to be an organization that can serve as that stopgap, so that we can identify where have people not been put in place to do the things that need to be done, and where can we step in and recruit the right resources to add to our core repositories to do that, to do the work that needs to be done. Obviously, we need to have the trust of the community to give us funding and empower us to do that. As a community elected board member, I have 2 jobs. First, 2 main jobs. First, as a board member, I have to protect the charter of our organization. I have to make sure that we are good with the state of Wyoming, and that the fiduciary standards of the organization are upheld, so that we are good as a company. When I look at a proposal that seems to be biting off more than it can chew, than the organization can take on, that's something that we as a board have to talk about and figure out. And then as a community member, I have to make sure that whatever we as an organization do can be brought forward to the community and be proposed as something that they can accept and hopefully be proud of. That's what I go for. So I'm sorry that our process is screwed up. It is something that should have been addressed a long time ago, and that we're getting. I really believe that we are addressing it now. The reason why the board decided to take the stance that it did on this particular proposal is because we believe that it could not be handled in this way at this time. We did not want to make it a punishment, which is why we said that it could be considered a proposal from a separate organization, because we wanted to respect the decentralization ethos of Cardano. We're not punishing you guys. We're not kicking you off the TSC. We're not kicking you out of Intersect or anything like that. We're just saying that this is something that has to be resolved. The first step to resolving it is recognizing that we have to fix our processes. The board is eating a lot of crow right now, and we're saying we're starting to reestablish where the lines are. And this is unfortunately one area where we have to draw a line, and we'll go from here.
But Adam, I think as I was saying to you, we still have to go through essentially the same amount of work. So if you will have to provide the effort to support that somehow, and the TSC is conscious of that. What it needs is to have a budget to allow it to do that. So you can't get away from the contract negotiation, contract formation, etc. And
we are asking for a general Intersect budget, and I presume that there will be contract negotiation and procurement for the things that we have to be responsible for come out of that. But we have to make sure that the things that we do that for is within our remit, and we're not exceeding the coordination level that we are expected to do.
Well, another point I've just raised with you is that there are aspects, some proposals, for example, which are expecting some integration or support from other parties, and I don't know whether these have been discussed. But an example is with the Peras proposal from Twig. They are requiring some IO integration support. So one of the things that has to be done as we're putting together the program of work is to negotiate all of these interdependencies. There are also timing dependencies, of course, that will have to be worked out. So that's going to have to be done as a coordinated process.
Okay, that's not something that's going to be figured out in this meeting right now. I hope that it can be figured out with us working with the other stakeholders of the ecosystem.
Neil, I think you're next.
You're on mute.
So I just want to go on record to say, in my opinion, the gaps are so large, the continuity is at risk. Okay, that's actually been our driving concern here, is not to lose the staff and not to lose the integrity of the system. And we want to find a way to get out of that potential existential problem for Cardano. That's why we've done what we've done, and that's why we will continue to do things.
Great. So we've spent quite a long time on this topic. Obviously, a very important topic. So thank you, Adam, and thank you, Kavinda, for joining us and presenting to us. Does anyone have anything final they'd like to say? Because otherwise, we have some things we do need to do.
I just wanted to make very sure, Adam, you are aware this is a recorded session and might go on YouTube. Okay, I wanted to make sure that everything you said was on the record and up for publication. Thank you very much. Because you came in later, I didn't know if you were aware. Thank you.
No, I'm aware, and I recognize how tough this situation is, but we have to find a way to resolve it. I just want to be upfront with you guys where we are right now and the distance to where we need to be.
Yeah. So Jack has offered to talk to us, Adam. So what I propose is we take him up on that offer, and then we keep you informed and engaged in order to get a good resolution. And I'm optimistic we can find something that works. I just don't want you to be misabused about the effort and complexity of what still remains to be done.
No, I really appreciate it. You know, the job of the TSC is to be that rallying point for the members of the Cardano ecosystem to come together and figure this stuff out. And your advice and guidance is absolutely necessary to do this. Just because we cannot support the proposal as you wrote it does not mean that we don't expect the TSC to be a key player in the coordination of what we're doing here, should intersects continue to exist and serve the community. So that that's not going to change. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Johnny, very last word.
Yep, the very last word I'm going to say is that the proposal document exists on IPFS and will stand as a historical reference document for any future potential needs that arise out of the current process. It's designed to be a reference document. So if there does seem to be blockers in the future, perhaps we can revisit it and make discussions around the content of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all that you've done to put this into consideration, for all that you've done for Cardano. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm going to drop off, but you guys take care for the rest of your meeting.
Yep. Talk to you again soon. Should we move on to the rest of the agenda? We have one or two things I think that need to be covered.
Well, let's get the formal sign off for.
Yeah. I thought we already. So
yeah, I was going to ask, because from my perspective, unless anyone wants to object, we've signed this off asynchronously via the group. So we can move on.
We agree. We have signed this off asynchronously.
Does anyone object to that sign off? My understanding was we'd already signed it off and had voted on it. If anyone objects to that sign off, now is the point to do so. Okay.
I would like to hear from Ricky.
I would like to ask, what do we have any idea of the timeframes for, presumably you're going to do SOWs and the such for this process, and how long they're going to take?
Which process? Sorry, Ricky?
Of giving a contract to Tweed to work on this.
No, this is the PERAS. This is the termination of the previous contract. Us paying them.
Oh,
this is agreeing that they've hit the deliverables and the milestones within the PERAS contract, and that we would approve payments. Yeah.
No SOW.
Apologies.
It's a good question. SOWs will have to be worked out for everything that comes this way.
We look forward to 18 of them from you, Vicky.
At least. Okay. So item 4. So we discussed this out of band, and we provided summary feedback on the IOE and tweak proposals. And this is done in the spirit of constructive criticism. So Ricky, there've been some. We've not had time to do a proper evaluation, but we've raised some issues that should be addressed in forming up if you're revising a proposal, we'd recommend you do that. Otherwise, they can be addressed as we go to contract negotiation. Johnny.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we actually got compelled to provide this feedback in some of the budgetary reconciliation workshops. It hadn't been done yet. And then DREPs came forward and asked explicitly for guidance and commentary on other proposals. So it's not a combative thing. It's just a reflective thing based on DREP requests. We did create a spreadsheet for DREP guidance on how to think about how to analyze proposals as a suggested guidance. But that wasn't enough in the eyes of some DREPs, and they wanted actual analysis.
Yeah, so doing that in the time scale for all of the proposals is clearly impossible, and the TSC simply picked the top 2 by value, and these are the ones that the DREPs were asking about particularly. So what would be ideal would be to get sentiment for all of the sub projects for these grouped projects. It's an all or nothing is quite hard to deal with, but I think you and Jeff actually proposed that, Ricky. So I don't know whether that can actually be accommodated in the voting process. It'd be nice to get positive confirmation for each of the sub-projects. Especially since when we did the survey in November, there was neutral or negative support for quite a few of the things that have been proposed. So one of the things we were expecting to do was to basically go and make the case to the community for the things that were less popular.
Yeah, it may have been misunderstanding or lack of technical understanding. So it's communicating, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was because I think in a lot of cases the topics that were receiving negative sentiment, that either they represent a misunderstanding of the proposal, or alternatively it was because what was being proposed was not being seen as core roadmap. So that was one of the reasons why we've discussed with the OSC the possibility for a tooling work stream. I think we're seeing that also coming up in the proposals that have been submitted via the budget proposals round. Ricky.
I'm not sure that this is correct or not, but I was told that the voting, the positive or negative ratings were calculated in a rather an interesting way, where by
I objected to that immediately.
Hang on a second. Let me just finish. By which, if there was a question asked against something, it got marked down negatively. Now that, to me, seems to be inherently wrong. If that is correct, I don't see that.
No, that's not correct. That's not correct, Ricky. These were positive or negative affirmations, and in fact, the process we're going through at the moment does seem to be negatively. It appears to be applying some sort of negative sentiment to questions.
Just to jump in here, I think we might be talking about two separate processes, in the sense that the process we were discussing was all the proposals we did last year, and when we went to the community and got a huge spreadsheet of responses. Yes, that's what you're talking about, Kevin. Yes, and Ricky, you're talking about what was put in that that spreadsheet. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is direct feedback from people on which we gathered in November and December on those proposals, right? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Okay. Which is informing a view of community prioritization, but it's not saying that things are good or bad. It's simply giving us some measure of sentiment, and we're getting that again with the current process. We're getting a measure of DREP sentiment now. Johnny.
Well, I don't know, Duncan. Do you want to go first? Your hand was up, sir.
No, I think it'd only be more confusing because there was another way of sentiment that was done in the workshops that that I do not understand.
Yeah. This is what I'm going to talk on. So
absolute witchcraft. So
we ourselves in the TSC had no input into the scoring system, and we actually expected that we would be lower in sentiment because of the community vote that had already happened going forward. And then the budgetary reconciliation workshop happened, and it was surprising to me. You'll see in the log that I was questioning that our scores had been flipped by mistake, because you guys had over 90% of DREP stake weighted vote. And we had like lower than that, possibly even lower than 50, but everything was brought over. So I thought we would be a lower sentiment analysis. We weren't aware that it was done based on comments and some sort of scoring system that flipped the script. And if you look back on the recording, you'll see that I come in and go, "What? Where does this come from?" Because we expected the polar opposite of what's being reported here. So accept our apologies.
Well, it's not our apologies, Johnny. I think what you're doing here is pointing out another flaw with the process.
In process, processes that we weren't being made informed of, and neither was IOE. So things happened that neither one of us expected, and it caused confusion to the community and to the proposers.
But we had no input on the sentiment analysis that intersect stuff. Okay, so what I propose is quickly cover the other issues, and then we need to close this meeting. So we've one of the points that we've been approached by Starstream. They've requested to come to present their work to us. I think that's a good thing to do. Propose if they're available to get them to present next week. I think it'd be an interesting information, or we can do it by a small group if we don't want to make it part of the main meeting. Saltus, I spelled their name wrong here, I think. But during one of the meetings, they raised the issue of maintenance support for Catalyst about tooling. The question is where it should lie. And Christian, I would think it should probably lie with the open source committee, that you should be prepared to pick up on that if you can, except where something is deemed to be critical for core infrastructure. So there might be a slight value judgment there. We might need to look at something and say, will the TSC adopt this as core infrastructure? And in which case it's going to have to be supported in the long term, or is it properly something that the OSC should be supporting as far as tooling stream? Johnny?
Just to help determine that, I would suggest that some meeting happen with Christian or other OSC just to make sure there's coordination on that and it's not just pushed over.
Yeah, no, this is why we were having triage meetings with the proposals that have been submitted. Is this TSC business? Is it product committee business? Is this OSC business? So we are absolutely. So I'm expecting that you might get a volume of those things coming in, Christian, in which case we're going to have to. There'll need to be a decision in the TSC if we're going to adopt something. We need to make sure it meets the criteria for core infrastructure.
I understand completely. I mean, that's why the incubation process is there, to run through both committees. And then if it needs funding, we do have the sustainability program to help evaluate that as well.
Yeah, it's really, so what we're really concerned by is the maintenance, Christian. So someone's built a tool, and the tool needs to be supported. It doesn't need any further development. How do we ensure that happens for the good of the community? And then the question is going to be, is it something which is core that is generally relied on or not? And we'll might have to make some kind of value judgment on that when working out where it lives, because what we can't do is to have too many things which we're supporting from the TSC.
Understood. Well, and then there's two different avenues where either you're funding the project itself, or do we just give a stipend to some maintainer to keep up with the repository? Yeah. Something like that.
In the latter case, I think we would say that's definitely something that we would see as part of the OSC remit. So we would definitely want you to administer that, Christian.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. Item 7, opening up sessions to GREPs, etc. So this is just a suggestion. I'll put it to a vote.
How do we mean? What relationship would the DREPs have? Would they be observers? Would they be voters?
They would come as observers, Neil.
I mean, they can already come as observers.
Actually, our meetings are not on the public calendar, as far as I'm aware. No,
I didn't know that.
What we'd be doing is switching to having the closed session as we have now, and then also having an open one, just like the product committee, and then anyone can come in on that public calendar link.
I think the one that would make sense is that this call would then be put on the public calendar, and we could then make sure that we advertise it and things, and we let observers come in. And
I second that. I would support that.
Okay, I was trying to work out what was missing. I mean, okay, if it's just a matter of publication, let's do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're officially closed here.
Yeah. Does anyone object to that? Please raise your hand if you object to it. Okay, great. So let's
make that 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 5 for everyone there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll tell Adam.
Give him a chance.
I don't think he'd be opposed, given the fact that he's already on public session open source committee, but I can't speak for him.
Okay. Can I just say I don't know how valuable it's going to be to them, apart from just watching. It feels like watching paint dry, perhaps, for them. So,
but it's the difference between the appearance, the looks closed versus is open.
And the reason I'm saying that is we may need to occasionally, once a month, once every 6 weeks or something, hold an open Q&A. where
Yep.
people can talk to us, right? That's what I'm trying to say, Johnny. I wasn't trying to be, I was trying to lead up to something, right? As opposed to put it down, right?
This is exactly something that Duncan has proposed, Neil, and something that's part of the proposal, which is to hold a regular technical town hall meeting, and indeed public physical meetings where people come and quiz us.
Yeah.
Music to my ears, man.
Well, yeah, well, it was in the proposal.
It's in the proposal, Johnny.
Right? You know.
I know, but like to have it actually, because I know it's in the proposal, but like where we are right now, I just wanted to make sure it was still happening. Right?
Great. Okay. So point 8, Kristen, you raised at the start of the meeting.
So can I just confirm, Christian, is this about putting this in, Intersect creating a repo for it to be a home? Is that what it is?
It's
Okay.
migrating it to Intersect, to my understanding.
Okay, so it's just about the repo at this point, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
There was already paperwork done to assign it over to us. I just want to make sure we go through the proper process and it wasn't rushed backdoor. So,
okay. Do you want to call for a vote? Does anybody object, Kevin? I don't think anybody.
I'm not objecting, but
no, I'm not objecting either. I'm just saying, I think please.
Does anyone object to moving the CAS agent repository to Intersect? What it means is Intersect takes the responsibility for maintaining the repo in going forwards.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll lump it in under core essentially.
Seems
okay,
reasonable.
I was just trying
looking ahead. We've mentioned maintenance, Christian, for Saltus. This is something that we might need to commit to maintain in future, and it might come from. So it might be under the TSC remit, or it might be under OSC remit. We'll need to agree that.
Yeah, which I also, just as part of the open source office, have to do a health assessment of all the repositories and find out where maintainers are and aren't currently. Because like Cardominal, we don't have maintainers on, even though we migrated that last year. So a contract wasn't signed.
That's one of the reasons why you need a gap analysis, Christian.
Yep, it's underway.
And you'll have to issue an RFP for it, I suspect.
More than
Anyway.
or at least some open tendering process, right? I mean, the point is people are seeing huge efforts in RFPs, but there are much more lightweight open tendering processes that will make sure we don't fall foul of anti-competition legislation.
Yeah. So absolutely, but we will need to seek out maintainers. Johnny, do you want the
last point?
Last word. Go.
I keep getting last word, and I'm sorry for doing it. But yeah, the CAS agent, as earlier in the delivery assurance report, was tentatively going to be integrated into the Cardano node itself. So there is some evidence towards the idea that it could be considered core, but it's tentative. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think there might be different aspects to the CAS agent, Johnny. So there might. So what I'm expecting is there's something is going to have to be might want to be integrated, but there might be something that is not integrated.
And I need better definitions for our project categories. Right now, it's just GovTool and Core. So
yeah, we can have a discussion about that. But what I would say would be core infrastructure. You could say, well, let's just say general tooling, yeah, and then you can split that down by category. So you could have governance tooling, network tooling. So you could have various categories of tooling.
agreed.
And DB Sync we're considering. So one of the interesting things that we've got at the moment is DB Sync. So we've got DB Sync, Cardano node emulator. We're considering both and other things. We're considering those to be core infrastructure. But obviously there is some subjectivity in
Well,
is accepted and what isn't.
I think it would be core because it has such a significant dependency to all the developers for referencing and calling for their,
That was the decision 3 or 4 months ago, but it can be revisited. Okay.
Great. Okay. Philip is not here, so what I'm suggesting we do is close the open part of the meeting and move to the closed session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Duncan,
Thank you.
taking copious minutes on this.